She was at the peak of her career, an unstoppable force in the fitness world. Millions followed her for motivation, hanging on to her every word as she preached discipline, self-love, and the power of resilience. To her fans, she was invincible. Untouchable. The kind of woman who had complete control over her life. But behind the bright lights of social media, something far darker was closing in. Her relationship with her lover seemed like a dream. He was successful, charming, and dangerously persuasive. The type of man who knew how to make a woman feel like she was the center of the universe. But Jasmine had no idea that stepping into his world meant stepping into something far more sinister than she could ever imagine. And once she uncovered the truth, it was already too late. One night. One argument. One decision that changed everything. By morning, she was gone mysteriously, which shocked the whole community. What really happened behind those penthouse doors? What secret was so dangerous that it was worth killing for? Stay with me, because this case is darker than you think. How does a woman who built her brand on strength and resilience fall victim to the very thing she warned others about? What happens when the love we trust the most becomes the weapon that destroys us? Before we dive into this shocking case, like this video and subscribe for more chilling tales of love, lies, and betrayal. Jasmine Fontaine wasn't just a fitness coach, she was a force of nature. At 30 years old, she had built an empire from nothing, turning her passion for health and wellness into a multi-million-dollar brand. She was the woman everyone wanted to be. Disciplined, driven, and effortlessly beautiful. Every post, every video, every live stream painted the picture of a woman who had mastered life. She had overcome struggle, pushed past adversity, and created a life that seemed untouchable. But no amount of success could prepare her for what was coming. Her boyfriend Rashad Whitaker was the kind of man who made an impression before he even spoke. At 36, he was a self-made millionaire in real estate, known for his sharp business mind and extravagant lifestyle. He moved with power, commanded respect, and had an aura that made people want to be in his orbit. He drove the cars everyone dreamed of, wore the finest designer suits, and had a home that looked like something out of a billionaire's fantasy. And when he wanted something, he always got it. The night Jasmine met Rashad, it was like something out of a movie. She was attending an exclusive industry event in Miami, surrounded by celebrities, entrepreneurs, and influencers just like her. The kind of place where million-dollar deals were made over champagne, where people didn't just come to network, they came to be seen. Jasmine had been invited as a special guest, her presence alone enough to elevate any event status. But the moment Rashad walked in, it was as if the entire room shifted. He had that effect on people, his confidence, his charm, the effortless way he carried himself. Their eyes met across the room, and from that moment, it was inevitable. Rashad made his way over, flashing that smooth, practiced smile. He didn't fumble with small talk. He didn't ask for a picture like the other men in the room. He looked her in the eyes and said, "You don't belong here." Jasmine laughed, caught off guard. "Oh yeah? And where do I belong?" "With me." That was Rashad, bold, decisive, and impossible to ignore. From that night on, they were inseparable. Their relationship moved fast, whirlwind vacations to the Maldives, luxury shopping sprees, private jets, and candlelit dinners at the most exclusive restaurants. Rashad made sure the world knew Jasmine was his. He showered her with designer gifts, supported her brand, and even made appearances in her fitness videos, showing off their power couple workouts. Social media ate it up. To her followers, Jasmine had found the perfect man, a strong, successful protector who matched her ambition. Fans called them relationship goals, the ultimate example of love and success. Every photo, every video, every public moment screamed perfection. And Jasmine? She believed it too. But behind the cameras, behind the curated images of paradise, things weren't as perfect as they seemed. There were little moments, subtle shifts in Rashad's behavior. Times when his charm would slip, when his grip on her waist would feel a little too tight, when his words carried an edge that made her pause. But love has a way of making people ignore the warning signs. And Jasmine, the woman who built a career on strength and self-discipline, was about to realize that some battles can't be won in the gym. Some fights are much more dangerous. And this one? This fight would cost her everything. At first, Jasmine thought Rashad's world was just another level of success, private jets, exclusive parties, and high-profile connections that made even the rich feel like outsiders. But as time went on, she began to notice things that didn't add up. Little details that clashed with the perfect image he so carefully curated. The women in his circle were different. They weren't just models, influencers, or business executives, they were nervous. Their smiles never quite reached their eyes, and whenever Rashad spoke, they listened a little too closely, their laughter forced, their bodies tense. Some of them avoided eye contact with him altogether. Others disappeared without a word, their social media accounts suddenly inactive, their brands mysteriously shut down. Then there were the phone calls. Rashad would step away in the middle of a conversation, his voice dropping into a hushed but urgent tone. Sometimes he spoke in code, sometimes in a language Jasmine didn't understand. But the way he carried himself afterward, the smug confidence, the air of control, unsettled her. And then there were the things he said. Rashad spoke about power in a way that made Jasmine's stomach turn. To him, power wasn't just about money or influence, it was about control. Control over business, over opportunities, over people. He believed some people were meant to lead and others were meant to follow. And the ones who refused to submit? They were nothing more than obstacles to be removed. Jasmine tried to shake off the unease, telling herself she was overthinking things. But the more she ignored it, the louder the warning signs became. One night, at a high-profile gala in Miami, she caught something that sent chills through her entire body. Rashad had been deep in conversation with a young woman, a rising beauty entrepreneur who had recently signed a deal with one of his companies. Jasmine had seen her on social media, bold, outspoken, the kind of woman who made waves. But in Rashad's presence, she was different. She barely spoke. Her hands trembled when she reached for her glass. And when Rashad leaned in, whispering something into her ear, her face went completely blank. Seconds later, she excused herself, walking away with unsteady steps, as if she were holding back tears. Jasmine turned to Rashad. What was that about? He smiled, calm, composed. Business. That was always his answer. Business. But what kind of business made women look like they were trapped? What kind of business made them disappear? The illusion of love was cracking, and Jasmine could feel the darkness creeping in. The man she thought she knew, the one who claimed to love her, support her, believe in her, was not the man standing beside her. And soon, she would discover the horrifying truth. It happened by accident. Jasmine had never been the type to snoop, but something about that night felt off. Rashad had left in a hurry, his phone buzzing with urgent messages before he stepped into his private elevator. He barely looked at her when he said he'd be back late. There was no usual kiss on the forehead, no lingering touch. Just a curt, distracted, "Don't wait up." She tried to brush it off, but a nagging feeling in her gut wouldn't let her. Something was wrong. She wandered into his office, intending only to grab her phone charger, but the glow of his laptop screen caught her attention. It was open. Unlocked. Waiting. Jasmine hesitated. Rashad was meticulous, he never left his devices unsecured. Then she saw it. A single folder sitting on the desktop, its name sending a chill through her spine. Confidential. Her fingers hovered over the trackpad. This isn't your business, Jasmine. But a voice in the back of her mind whispered, what if it is? With a single click, her entire world shattered. The folder expanded, revealing dozens of subfolders, each labeled with a woman's name. Some she recognized immediately, socialites, influencers, women she had admired from afar. Others were unfamiliar, but the contents were the same. Jasmine clicked on the first folder. A video popped up, the screen black for a moment before flickering to life. A woman sat in front of the camera, her face pale, her eyes red-rimmed. She was reading from a piece of paper, her voice eerily flat. I, Vanessa Cole, acknowledge that I willingly entered into this agreement. I understand my role and the expectations that come with it. I consent to. Her voice cracked, but she kept reading. Jasmine's breath caught in her throat. She clicked on another file. This time, it was footage of a dimly lit hotel room. A different woman lay sprawled on the bed, her movements sluggish, her eyes barely open. A man's voice, Rashad's voice, spoke to her in low, commanding tones. You know what happens if you don't do as you're told. Jasmine's stomach twisted. More videos. More files. Messages sent from burner phones. Bank statements detailing hush money transactions. Women, some of them household names, being extorted, manipulated, owned. Her hands shook as she scrolled. Rashad wasn't just a businessman. He was the mastermind behind a sinister organization that preyed on powerful women, especially influencers like her. His network specialized in coercion, blackmail, and manipulation, luring women in with promises of exclusivity and business opportunities before trapping them in a cycle of fear. Those who resisted were either financially destroyed, or they disappeared. Jasmine slammed the laptop shut, her pulse roaring in her ears. She felt sick. Dizzy. The man she loved, the man she had trusted, was a predator. She couldn't unsee it. She couldn't pretend it wasn't real. When Rashad returned, she was waiting. He barely had time to pour himself a drink before she spoke. How long? He turned, eyebrow raised. How long what? How long have you been doing this? Her voice was steady, but inside, she was screaming. Rashad smirked, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. I don't know what you think you saw, Jasmine, but I suggest you forget it. Her hands clenched into fists. I saw everything, Rashad. The contracts. The videos. The threats. Her voice sharpened. The women you own. For the first time, Rashad's smile wavered. She took a step closer, her heart pounding. You're going to shut it down. All of it. You're going to walk away from this, or I swear to God, I will go live and tell the world everything. Silence. Then, Rashad laughed. A deep, amused chuckle, as if she had just told the funniest joke he'd ever heard. You think you can threaten me? He took a slow sip of his drink, shaking his head. Sweetheart, you have no idea who you're dealing with. Jasmine's pulse pounded, but she held her ground. And you have no idea what I'm capable of. That's when she saw it, the flicker of something dark in his eyes. A shift. The moment his amusement faded into something far more dangerous. Rashad placed his glass down with eerie calm. When he looked at her again, the warmth was gone. His voice was barely above a whisper. You just made the biggest mistake of your life. Jasmine swallowed hard, refusing to back down. But deep down, she knew. She had just crossed a line she could never uncross. The smirk on his face faded. His jaw tightened, and his fists clenched at his sides. He took a step toward her, slow and deliberate, like a predator cornering its prey. Jasmine took a step back, bumping into the coffee table. The air between them thickened, suffocating, electric with unspoken rage. Jasmine, he warned, voice dangerously low. She swallowed hard. I'm leaving. That was all it took. What happened next was a blur of horror. Neighbors later recalled hearing her scream, high-pitched, raw, the sound of pure terror. A crash followed, like glass shattering, then the deep, guttural sound of furniture scraping across the hardwood floor. And then silence. Security footage from the apartment building told the rest of the story. Jasmine, barefoot and frantic, yanked the door open. Her hands fumbled with her phone as she tried to call for help. But before she could take another step, Rashad's arm shot out, grabbing her by the waist. She fought him, her nails clawing at his skin, but he was stronger. He yanked her back inside, slammed the door shut, and locked it. By morning, Jasmine Fontaine was dead. At 7:42 a.m., Rashad dialed 911, his voice shaking with carefully placed distress. "She's not breathing," he gasped. I just woke up, and she's not moving." Paramedics arrived within minutes, rushing into the apartment. Jasmine lay in the bed, motionless. Her lips had turned an eerie shade of blue, her eyes half open, staring at nothing. Rashad hovered nearby, running his hands through his hair, playing the part of the devastated boyfriend. But something was off. One paramedic's gaze lingered on the bruises circling Jasmine's neck, dark, fresh, unmistakable. Defensive wounds marred her arms, her fingers bent unnaturally, as if she had fought to pry someone's hands off her throat. And Rashad's story didn't add up. "She was fine last night," he insisted, voice breaking at all the right moments. "We went to bed, and when I woke up," he trailed off, letting the weight of his words hang in the air. But Jasmine hadn't simply stopped breathing in her sleep. The unnatural tint of her lips. The way her fingernails were chipped and cracked from desperate struggle. The broken lamp in the living room, shards of glass embedded in the rug. Something had happened here. Something violent. Something Rashad wasn't saying. The paramedics exchanged glances. Then one of them stepped back, reached for his radio, and said the words that sealed Rashad's fate. "Call the police. We've got a suspicious death." The truth never stays buried for long. Jasmine Fontaine's death was not the tragic accident Rashad tried to make it seem. It was murder. Cold, calculated, and laced with the very drugs his empire used to control and destroy lives. An autopsy was conducted. The autopsy report left no room for doubt. Jasmine had been injected with a lethal combination of fentanyl and GHB. A fatal dose. A dose meant to silence her forever. But Jasmine had fought. The fractured wrist, the bruises on her neck, the fingernail scratches embedded in Rashad's arms, she hadn't gone quietly. She had clawed, thrashed, and resisted until the last breath left her body. She knew the truth about him, and for that, she had to die. The investigation moved quickly. The moment paramedics flagged her death as suspicious, homicide detectives took over. They searched Rashad's penthouse, expecting to find the usual signs of domestic violence, a broken lamp, overturned furniture, maybe even bloodstains. What they uncovered was far worse. Laptops filled with videos, images, and documents, blackmail material that kept women trapped under Rashad's control. Files labeled with names, details, threats. Some of the footage was filmed without consent, captured by hidden cameras positioned strategically throughout the penthouse. A closet in the back of the bedroom hid a secret room. Behind a heavy bookshelf, detectives found a door leading to a small, soundproofed space equipped with cameras, restraints, and a leather chair bolted to the floor. It wasn't just a hidden room. It was a prison. Then came the burner phones. Multiple devices, each containing a disturbing archive of messages. Threats. Warnings. Coercion. Some women begged to be left alone, pleading for their freedom. Others were instructed to stay in line or risk having their families destroyed. Rashad had built an empire of fear, his power rooted in manipulation and violence. Jasmine had been right about him. She had known what he was, and she had tried to escape. But Rashad couldn't let that happen. When detectives pulled security footage from the building system, the final piece of the puzzle snapped into place. There she was, Jasmine, barefoot, shaking, desperate. Trying to leave. And then Rashad, his grip tightening around her waist, dragging her back inside as she fought against him. her face twisted in fear. The door slamming shut behind them. The last time anyone saw her alive. It didn't take long for the arrest warrant to be issued. Within days, Rashad was in the middle of a business meeting when they came for him. A team of officers stormed the restaurant, pinning him against the table before he could even register what was happening. The other men at the table, his associates, sat frozen, their faces pale as Rashad struggled against the cuffs. "You have the right to remain silent," an officer's voice cut through the chaos. "You are under arrest for the murder of Jasmine Fontaine, human trafficking, conspiracy, and multiple counts of sexual assault." His empire collapsed in a single breath. Cameras flashed. Customers whispered. The weight of his crimes was finally dragging him under, and this time, there was no way out. The world watched as Rashad was led out in handcuffs, the man who once controlled everything now powerless. Jasmine's death had exposed him, pulled every dark secret into the light. He had spent years silencing women, but now the truth had a voice. And it was louder than he ever could have imagined. They watched as Rashad Whitaker walked into the courtroom for the first time in handcuffs, his designer suit replaced by an orange jumpsuit, his arrogance buried beneath the weight of his crimes. The cameras were relentless, flashing with every step he took, capturing the fall of a man who once thought himself untouchable. The trial was more than just a legal proceeding, it was a reckoning. The courtroom was packed every single day, the air thick with tension as prosecutors laid out the horrifying truth. Rashad wasn't just a murderer. He was a predator, a manipulator, a man who had built an empire on the pain of others. And now, one of his victims was speaking from beyond the grave. Jasmine Fontaine's death had ignited something no one could contain. Women who had once lived in fear of him began stepping forward, one by one, their voices steady, their eyes burning with long-buried rage. "I thought he was my savior," one woman testified, her hands trembling as she pointed at Rashad. "But he was my worst nightmare. He told me if I ever left, he would destroy me," another woman said, her voice thick with emotion. "I believed him. I believed he was unstoppable." But Rashad wasn't unstoppable anymore. For weeks, the jury listened as prosecutors dismantled every lie, every false alibi, every attempt to paint him as the grieving boyfriend instead of the monster he truly was herself. But the evidence was a tidal wave, drowning every weak excuse, every pathetic attempt to twist the truth. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. When they returned, the entire courtroom held its breath. Rashad sat motionless, his jaw clenched, his hands gripping the table so tightly his knuckles turned white. The foreman stood, clearing his throat. "We, the jury, find the defendant, Rashad Whitaker, guilty on all counts." The words hung in the air like a final, crushing blow. Gasps echoed through the courtroom. Some of the women who had testified burst into tears, clutching one another in silent relief. Rashad didn't react. He didn't beg, didn't cry, didn't scream. He just sat there, staring straight ahead, as if he still couldn't believe it. As if he had spent so many years bending the world to his will that he never truly considered the possibility of losing. But he had lost. When the judge handed down the sentence, life in prison without the possibility of parole, there was no applause, no cheers. Only a deep, collective exhale. It was over. The headlines called it the trial of the century, but for the women who had suffered under Rashad's control, it was something more. It was justice. It was the end of fear. It was the moment they finally reclaimed their voices. Jasmine had paid the ultimate price, but in death, she had sparked a movement. And Rashad Whitaker would spend the rest of his life in a 6x8 prison cell, haunted by the voices of the women he could never silence again. Jasmine Fontaine's story is more than just a tragedy, it's a chilling reminder of how power can be wielded as a weapon, how control can masquerade as love, and how the most dangerous monsters often wear the most charming masks. She wasn't just another headline. She wasn't just another victim. She was a woman who saw the truth and refused to look away. A woman who tried to break free. A woman who fought until her last breath. And though she didn't survive, her story did. In the end, Rashad Whittaker lost everything. His empire crumbled. His secrets were dragged into the light. The voices he spent years silencing came back louder than ever, forcing the world to listen. But how many more women are still out there, trapped in the shadows? How many more stories end before they can even be told? Jasmine's legacy isn't just in the trial, the verdict, or the fall of the man who took her life. It's in the movement she inspired. It's in the women who now have the courage to speak. It's in the warning that lingers long after the cameras stop flashing. Because for every Jasmine, there's another woman out there fighting to escape, hoping someone will hear her before it's too late. If this story shocked you, if it made you think, if it made you question everything you thought you knew about love, power, and betrayal, don't look away. Like and subscribe for more cases that expose the darkest corners of the human heart.